What if the reason you cannot remember your dreams has nothing to do with a weak memory? What if something is happening in the final moments before you wake up and you were never supposed to know? An X switch has stepped forward with a chilling revelation from inside the occult world. Why do some dreams vanish in seconds while others leave behind fear, confusion, and spiritual heaviness? Is it possible that battles are taking place while you sleep and evidence is being erased before you? Eyes ever open? Stay until the end, because what you are about to hear may completely change how you view your nights, your dreams, and your spiritual awareness. Most people think sleep is a period of complete inactivity. They believe the day ends when their eyes close and begins again when their eyes open. But what if that is not the whole story? What if the night is more significant than you ever imagined? The former witch who shared this testimony described sleep as one of the most vulnerable periods in a person's life. According to her account, many practitioners of occult rituals believed that the sleeping hours offered unique opportunities to influence fear, confusion, temptation, and spiritual weakness. She claimed that one of the greatest advantages was not merely affecting dreams, it was ensuring that the dreamer remembered almost nothing. Think about that. How many times have you awakened with the feeling that something important happened? For a few seconds, you could almost see it, you could almost grasp it. Then suddenly it disappeared. The details dissolved. The images scattered. The memory slipped away. Within minutes, nothing remained except a strange feeling. Many people experience this. Some dismiss it. Others never question it. Yet the experience is remarkably common. The ex-witch explained that within occult circles, dreams were often viewed as powerful because they bypass many of the distractions that dominate waking life. When people are awake, they analyze, they question, they resist, they make decisions. But during sleep, the mind operates differently. Dreams can leave emotional impressions that linger long after specific details are forgotten. Fear can remain. Anxiety can remain. Confusion can remain, even when the dream itself disappears. Have you ever woken up discouraged without knowing why? Have you ever felt unusually heavy after a night's sleep? Have you ever experienced an unexplained sense of dread the moment you opened your eyes? Many people have, and often they cannot identify the source. The former witch claimed that this confusion itself was considered valuable, because when a person cannot identify the source of a problem, they often do not know how to confront it. Imagine a thief entering a house. Now imagine the thief leaves no footprints, no fingerprints, no broken windows, no evidence. The homeowner knows something is wrong, but cannot explain what happened. The uncertainty becomes part of the damage. According to this testimony, forgotten dreams were sometimes viewed in a similar way. The dream disappears, but the emotional residue remains. The person feels affected but lacks clarity, and confusion becomes a weapon. Now consider another possibility. Not every forgotten dream is negative. Many people throughout history have believed that dreams can contain insights, warnings, guidance, or important reflections about life. Whether viewed spiritually or psychologically, dreams have fascinated humanity for thousands of years. People have recorded dreams, studied dreams, sought meaning in dreams. Why? Because dreams can feel significant. Sometimes a dream seems ordinary. Other times it feels unusually vivid. It captures attention. It refuses to be ignored. The ex-witch claimed that within some occult beliefs, clarity was considered dangerous. A person who understands what is happening becomes harder to manipulate. A person who recognizes patterns becomes harder to deceive. A person who pays attention becomes harder to influence. That idea deserves reflection, because confusion often thrives where awareness is absent. Look at everyday life. A scam succeeds when someone does not recognize the warning signs. A lie succeeds when someone does not notice inconsistencies. Manipulation succeeds when someone remains unaware. Awareness changes everything. And this is why many people place value on becoming more attentive to their thoughts, emotions, habits, and experiences. Not because every unusual event carries a hidden message, but because attention creates understanding. The former witch described occasions when practitioners would celebrate confusion more than direct influence. That may sound surprising, yet confusion can produce its own consequences. A confused person may doubt themselves. A confused person may hesitate. A confused person may ignore important issues because they cannot fully identify them. Over time, uncertainty can become exhausting. This is why many people find it useful to pay attention when they repeatedly wake up feeling disturbed, fearful, or emotionally unsettled. Not because every feeling has a supernatural cause, but because repeated patterns deserve examination. If something continues happening, it is worth noticing. It is worth reflecting upon. It is worth discussing with trusted people. One of the most striking parts of the testimony involved the idea of spiritual awareness. The ex switch explained that many practitioners feared people who were alert, disciplined, and grounded in their faith. Why? Because awareness disrupts secrecy, awareness exposes hidden influences, awareness encourages action. A person who ignores everything becomes easy to influence. A person who pays attention becomes more difficult. Think about a guard standing watch. The guard does not prevent every threat merely by existing. But vigilance changes the environment. Potential dangers face resistance. Potential dangers face observation. Potential dangers face accountability. The same principle applies to many areas of life. Attention matters. Awareness matters. Discernment matters. According to the testimony, forgotten dreams were often discussed not because the dreams themselves were always important, but because people rarely investigate what they cannot remember. They simply move on. They dismiss the experience. The moment passes, and no further questions are asked. But questions can be powerful. Questions lead to understanding. Questions lead to growth. Questions lead to preparation. The former witch said that one of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that every unexplained experience should automatically be ignored. Again, that does not mean every forgotten dream contains hidden revelations. It means paying attention to recurring patterns instead of dismissing them without thought. Do you repeatedly wake up anxious? Do you repeatedly wake up fearful? Do you repeatedly wake up feeling emotionally drained? If so, it may be worth examining what is happening in your life. It may be worth strengthening healthy routines. It may be worth spending time in prayer, reflection, or personal growth. Awareness creates opportunities for change. The testimony concluded with a warning, not a warning about living in fear, but a warning about living unconsciously. Because people who never pay attention to what affects them often surrender influence over their own lives. They become reactive instead of intentional. They drift instead of directing. They overlook patterns that could help them grow stronger. The ex-witch claimed that secrecy was always an ally of darkness. Whether that darkness appeared through deception, manipulation, fear, or confusion, secrecy gave it room to operate. That is why awareness matters. That is why attention matters. And that is why the first step is not panic. The first step is observation. Notice what happens. Notice recurring patterns. Notice your emotional state, your habits. Notice your nights. Because every battle becomes easier to address once it is recognized. And according to this testimony, recognition is exactly what hidden influences fear the most. The former witch revealed something that shocked many listeners. She claimed that in occult circles, success was not always measured by what a person remembered. Sometimes success was measured by what they forgot. That statement sounds strange. How can forgetting something be important? According to her testimony, a forgotten dream can still leave behind emotional fingerprints. The images disappear, the storyline vanishes, the details dissolve. Yet the emotional impact remains, and that impact can influence the rest of the day. Have you ever woken up angry for no apparent reason? Have you ever opened your eyes feeling anxious, discouraged, or emotionally exhausted? Nothing happened that morning. No bad news arrived. No conflict occurred. Yet something felt wrong. You carried a burden you could not explain. Many people experience moments like these. Most simply push forward. They assume it is random. They tell themselves it means nothing. But the former witch claimed that many occult practitioners paid close attention to emotional residue, because emotions influence decisions. A fearful person often acts differently than a confident person. A discouraged person often acts differently than a hopeful person. An anxious person often acts differently than a peaceful person. Small emotional shifts can create large consequences. Think about how one negative mood can affect an entire day. A person becomes impatient, they become distracted, they lose focus, they speak carelessly, they react emotionally. Hours later, they wonder why everything seemed difficult. Now imagine experiencing that repeatedly, night after night, week after week, month after month. According to the ex-witch, confusion was considered one of the most effective tools because confused people rarely identify the true source of their struggles. Instead, they fight symptoms. They never address causes. Imagine seeing smoke inside a building. You open every window. You turn on every fan. You remove the smoke, but the fire remains hidden. Soon the smoke returns. The problem continues because the source was never addressed. The former witch claimed that emotional residue worked in a similar way. People often focus only on visible symptoms. They overlook deeper patterns. That does not mean every negative emotion originates from a dream. Life itself contains challenges. Stress exists. Pressure exists. Relationships become difficult. Responsibilities become overwhelming. But when patterns repeat themselves consistently, wisdom calls for examination. The testimony described individuals who repeatedly woke up feeling defeated before their day even began. Nothing external had happened, yet internally they felt drained. Hope seemed weaker, motivation seemed lower, faith felt harder to maintain. The Switch claimed that many practitioners believed a discouraged person was easier to influence than a confident person. Why? Because discouragement weakens resistance, it weakens persistence, it weakens determination. People who feel defeated often stop fighting battles they are capable of winning. This principle extends beyond spiritual discussions. Look at athletes, look at leaders, look at entrepreneurs, look at students. Mental and emotional condition influences performance. A person who believes defeat is inevitable often performs differently than a person who believes victory remains possible. Mindset matters, attitude matters, expectation matters. According to the testimony, forgotten dreams sometimes served as vehicles for planting emotional disruption. Again, the focus was not on memory. The focus was on influence. The focus was on emotional impact. The focus was on creating internal instability. The former witch described situations where people dismissed recurring nightmares because they could not remember exact details. Only fragments remained: a dark hallway, a chase, a threatening figure, an overwhelming sense of fear. The next morning they remembered almost nothing, yet fear lingered. The emotional atmosphere remained. And over time they accepted those feelings as normal. That is where the warning becomes serious. Anything repeated long enough begins to feel familiar. Anything familiar begins to feel normal. And what feels normal often escapes examination. A person can adapt to unhealthy patterns without realizing it. They can adapt to constant anxiety. They can adapt to chronic fear. They can adapt to discouragement. Eventually, they stop asking questions. The ex witch claimed this was dangerous because acceptance often precedes surrender. Once a person stops questioning negative patterns, those patterns gain greater influence. Consider a room that slowly becomes darker. If the change happens gradually, people may not notice. Their eyes adjust. The darkness becomes familiar, but the room is still dark. The condition remains unchanged. According to the testimony, some emotional burdens operate similarly. They arrive gradually. They increase slowly. They become familiar. People adapt. Then they assume the burden is simply part of life. The former witch emphasized the importance of spiritual awareness, not fear, not obsession. Awareness. There is a difference. Fear magnifies problems. Awareness identifies problems, creates paralysis. Awareness creates preparation. Fear focuses on threats. Awareness focuses on truth. Many people make the mistake of assuming awareness and fear are the same thing. They are not. A firefighter does not fear every spark, but a firefighter pays attention. A pilot does not panic over every sound, but a pilot remains alert. A wise person notices patterns without becoming consumed by them. That balance is important. The testimony also described another reason forgotten dreams mattered. Some dreams reveal personal vulnerabilities, not supernatural vulnerabilities, human vulnerabilities, fears, hidden anxieties, lingering regrets. Dreams sometimes expose areas requiring healing. When people ignore recurring themes completely, they may miss opportunities for growth. Again, the focus is not panic, the focus is understanding, the focus is self examination, the focus is discernment. The X-Switch claimed that practitioners often preferred individuals who lived on autopilot. Why? Because autopilot reduces awareness. People stop paying attention. They stop reflecting. They stop evaluating patterns. Days blend together. Weeks pass unnoticed. Months disappear. Nothing changes because nothing is examined. But awareness interrupts that cycle. Awareness asks questions. Awareness investigates patterns. Awareness seeks understanding. Awareness creates opportunities for transformation. One of the most powerful statements from the testimony was this: remains after the dream matters more than the dream itself. That idea deserves careful thought, because many people focus entirely on remembering details, yet they ignore the emotional condition that follows. Perhaps the better question is not always, what did I dream? Perhaps the better question is, what effect did the night leave behind? Did you wake up peaceful? Did you wake up hopeful? Did you wake up strengthened? Or did you wake up burdened, fearful, and emotionally drained? Those questions reveal important information. The former, which concluded this section with a warning: not every forgotten dream is significant. Not every strange night carries hidden meaning. But recurring emotional patterns should never be ignored. Repeated fear deserves attention. Repeated anxiety deserves attention. Repeated discouragement deserves attention. Because awareness is the beginning of wisdom. Awareness is the beginning of preparation. And according to her testimony, hidden influences lose power when they are brought into the light of conscious observation. The moment you begin paying attention, you stop drifting. The moment you begin paying attention, you stop assuming. The moment you begin paying attention, you begin reclaiming territory that confusion once occupied. And that, she claimed, is exactly what forces of deception never want you to do. The former witch said there was one period of the night that received unusual attention. Not the beginning of sleep, not the middle of sleep, but the final moments before a person wakes. According to her testimony, this was considered a critical window, a transition point, a boundary between the unseen world of dreams and the conscious awareness of the waking mind. And it was during this period, she claimed, that many people lost what they had experienced during the night. Think about your own experience. How many times have you awakened with a dream still alive in your mind? The images were clear, the emotions were vivid. You knew exactly what happened. Then you reached for your phone. You sat up in bed. You thought about the day ahead, and suddenly everything disappeared. Within seconds, the dream was gone. Only fragments remained. A face, a voice, a feeling, everything else vanished. The ex-witch claimed that practitioners often discussed how fragile dream memories could be. A dream might feel unforgettable while you are inside it. Yet moments later, it becomes almost impossible to recover. That fragility fascinated them, because anything fragile can be disrupted, anything unstable can be influenced, anything temporary can be erased. According to her account, this final transition from sleeping consciousness to waking consciousness was viewed as a vulnerable period, a period where clarity could either be preserved or lost. And this is where many people make an important mistake. They assume awareness begins the moment they open their eyes. But awareness often begins before that. There is a brief space, a brief transition, a brief overlap. The dream has not fully faded. The waking mind has not fully taken control. For a few moments, both worlds seem to touch. Then the connection breaks. The dream disappears. The day begins. And most people never think about it again. The former witch claimed that many practitioners preferred when people moved immediately into distraction, because distraction accelerates forgetting. Distraction pulls attention away from reflection. Distraction replaces observation with activity. The moment a person becomes consumed by notifications, schedules, worries, and responsibilities, the dream often vanishes completely. Again, her testimony focused less on the dream itself and more on awareness, because awareness slows the process. Awareness notices, awareness observes, awareness remembers. Imagine writing something important on a whiteboard, then immediately spraying water across it. The message begins to disappear. Soon nothing remains. Now imagine taking a picture first. The message survives. The information is preserved. According to the former witch, awareness functions similarly. When people intentionally pause and reflect, they often retain more than they realize. When they rush immediately into distraction, memory fades rapidly. This idea applies far beyond dreams. Consider conversations. A person may hear valuable advice, but if they immediately become distracted, much of it is forgotten. Consider education. Students who review information shortly after learning it often retain more. The principle is simple. Attention strengthens memory. Distraction weakens memory. The ex-witch claimed that many occult practitioners understood this principle well. Whether used in spiritual contexts or ordinary life, attention remains powerful. Attention determines what survives. Attention determines what is remembered. Attention determines what shapes future decisions. One of the most striking stories she shared involved individuals who repeatedly experienced dreams that felt significant but never took time to reflect upon them. Every morning followed the same pattern: wake up, rush forward, forget everything, repeat. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years. The pattern never changed, because no space existed for reflection, no space existed for awareness, no space existed for observation. Eventually, forgetting became automatic. The person expected to remember nothing. And because They expected nothing, they paid attention to nothing. The former which believed this expectation itself could become a problem, because expectations shape behavior. People rarely search for what they believe does not matter. People rarely protect what they do not value. People rarely preserve what they assume is worthless. That is why awareness begins with recognizing importance. When something matters, people treat it differently. They become attentive. They become intentional. They become careful. According to her testimony, practitioners often preferred people who underestimated the importance of awareness. Because unaware people rarely notice patterns, and patterns reveal truths. Consider a detective investigating a mystery. The detective succeeds because patterns emerge, small details connect, clues accumulate, a larger picture forms. Without attention, those connections remain invisible. The same principle applies to many aspects of life. Patterns reveal habits, reveal influences. Patterns reveal problems. Patterns reveal opportunities. The former, which one that repeated forgetfulness, can sometimes create a false sense of helplessness. People begin saying things like, I never remember anything. My dreams never matter. There's no point paying attention. Those beliefs become self reinforcing. They lower expectation, they reduce awareness, they encourage passivity. And passivity rarely produces understanding. One of the most powerful themes in her testimony involve intentionality. Intentional people notice things. Intentional people reflect. Intentional people ask questions. Intentional people resist drifting through life unconsciously. She claimed that many practitioners feared intentionality more than they feared intelligence, because intentionality creates consistency. A highly intelligent person can still ignore warning signs, but an intentional person observes. An intentional person examines. An intentional person remains alert. That alertness becomes a form of protection, not protection through fear, protection through awareness, protection through discipline, protection through understanding. The X switch repeatedly emphasized that awareness should never become obsession. This distinction matters. Obsession creates unhealthy fear. Awareness creates healthy observation. Obsession sees danger everywhere. Awareness seeks truth. Obsession magnifies uncertainty. Awareness pursues clarity. People often confuse the two, but they are not the same. A balanced person remains observant without becoming consumed. A balanced person pays attention without surrendering peace. A balanced person seeks understanding while remaining grounded. According to her testimony, this balance was one of the greatest threats to deception, because deception depends on extremes, either complete ignorance or overwhelming fear. Both create vulnerability, but clarity creates stability, and stability creates resistance, the former which concluded with a powerful warning. The final moments before waking may be brief, only seconds, perhaps less. Yet those moments can determine what is remembered and what is forgotten. They can determine whether awareness grows or fades. They can determine whether patterns are noticed or ignored. Most people treat those moments as insignificant. They rush past them, they overlook them, they dismiss them. But according to her testimony, hidden influences prefer people who never pause long enough to notice what is happening. Because once a person begins paying attention, confusion begins losing ground. Once a person becomes intentional, passivity begins losing influence. And once awareness awakens, deception finds fewer places to hide. That is why he claimed the battle is often not about the dream itself. The battle is about what survives the transition into waking life. And the outcome of that battle may shape far more than most people realize. The former witch made one final claim that tied everything together. She said the real issue was never just dreams, it was what people do after they wake up. Because according to her testimony, the moment of waking is where most people surrender whatever they experienced in the night, not because it was forcibly taken, but because it was immediately replaced. Replaced with noise, replaced with distraction, replaced with urgency. The mind shifts from reflection to reaction, and in that shift, memory fades. Think about your mornings. Alarm rings. Your hand reaches for your phone. Messages appear. Notifications demand attention. Plans for the day take over. Within minutes, the night becomes irrelevant. The dream is gone. The feeling is gone. Even the emotional residue begins to fade. The ex-witch said this was not accidental. She described it as a predictable outcome of divided attention. Because attention cannot fully hold two worlds at once. It either anchors in reflection or it dissolves into distraction. There is no middle ground for long. She claimed that many practitioners understood this principle deeply, not in mystical terms, but in behavioral terms. They understood that whatever captures attention first often determines the direction of the mind. And once direction is set, memory follows. If attention goes immediately to chaos, memory of the night disappears. If attention pauses in stillness, fragments of the night can remain. That does not make every dream meaningful, but it makes forgetting less automatic and awareness more present. The X-Switch explained that the human mind is not only a storage system, it is also a filter. It selects what is important, it discards what is not. And that selection process is heavily influenced by attention. This means forgetting is not always a failure. Sometimes it is a result of prioritization. But when forgetting becomes constant and absolute, it can indicate something else, a lack of intentional reflection. She described individuals who never paused at all. They move from sleep to activity instantly, from inner experience to external demand instantly, from reflection to reaction instantly. Over time, they stopped remembering anything from the night, not because nothing happened, but because nothing was preserved, the former which emphasized the key principle. What is not observed is often lost. What is not reflected upon often fades. What is not valued is rarely retained. She then turned the focus back to emotional awareness. Even when dreams are forgotten, emotional states remain powerful indicators. She asked a simple question in her testimony. What do you carry into your morning? Do you carry calmness? Do you carry heaviness? Do you carry clarity? Or do you carry confusion you cannot explain? These emotional states shape behavior more than most people realize. A calm mind responds differently than a disturbed one. A focused mind responds differently than a scattered one. A stable mind responds differently than a restless one. According to her account, many practitioners paid attention to emotional transitions because they revealed more than dream imagery ever could. They showed internal direction. They showed mental condition. They showed vulnerability or strength. She warned that ignoring emotional signals can lead to misinterpretation of one's own state. A person may think everything is fine because nothing obvious is wrong, yet internally something may still feel unsettled. That disconnect creates confusion, and confusion once again becomes the central issue. The testimony then shifted toward the idea of intentional awareness as a form of protection, not mystical protection, but psychological and spiritual discipline. She described people who learn to pause briefly upon waking, not to analyze every detail, not to chase every fragment, but to simply observe. How do I feel right now? That small moment of reflection created awareness, and awareness created clarity, and clarity weakened confusion. She claimed that this practice alone changed how people experience their mornings, because instead of rushing into automatic behavior, they began with observation. Instead of forgetting immediately, they created space for recognition. Instead of drifting, they anchored themselves. This anchoring, she said, was enough to disrupt cycles of forgetfulness, not by force, but by attention. The former which stressed that most influence loses power when it is noticed, not feared, exaggerated, just noticed, because unnoticed influence operates freely. But noticed influence becomes limited. It loses stealth. It loses control. It loses momentum. She tied this back to the original claim about dreams. Whether or not dreams are fully remembered is not the only issue. The deeper issue is whether a person lives in awareness or in automatic forgetting, because automatic living weakens perception, and weakened perception creates gaps in understanding. Those gaps then get filled by assumptions, distractions, or confusion. She concluded that the strongest individuals are not those who remember everything perfectly, but those who remain aware enough to recognize patterns in themselves, their emotions, their thoughts, their habits, their transitions, even their mornings, even their nights. The testimony ended with a final reflection. If awareness is present, forgetting loses its dominance. If attention is active, confusion loses its authority. If reflection is practiced even, fragments become meaningful. And if nothing else, the simple act of noticing changes everything. Because what you notice, you begin to understand. And what you understand, you begin to change. Now you have heard what was never meant to be spoken aloud. The hidden patterns have been exposed. The silence around your nights has been broken. You are no longer allowed to live unaware of your own mind. Stand in awareness, not fear. Stand in clarity, not confusion. And move forward with a mind that no longer accepts blindness as normal.